Hello, welcome. This is Kelly Fitzpatrick with RedMonk, here with another What is How-To video. Today's topic, what is automated diagnostics? How to reduce escalations and accelerate resolution with automation. With me today is Jake Cohen from PagerDuty. Jake, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Jake Cohen. I'm a senior product manager on the process automation team here at PagerDuty. So I'm involved specifically with our solutions and integrations built on top of the core platform of process and runbook automation, which is PagerDuty's runbook automation product suite and product line. And I've been helping out with this solution that we've been calling Automated Diagnostics. So that's why I'm here and happy to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about two things. First, automation, which is a topic that it seems so ubiquitous now. We talk about automation for everything: network automation, infrastructure automation, and two words that I already heard you say, Jake, process automation, and maybe you said runbook automation, maybe you didn't, maybe I heard something you didn't say. But I feel like both of these concepts are essential to what we're looking at today. Process automation, being how our kind of business process is getting automated, and sometimes very technical business processes, at that. And then the second thing I think that it's really important to kind of call out now is the topic of incident response, which if you're already familiar with PagerDuty, this is something that you've already thought about. You already have this in your vocabulary. But what we're seeing at large in terms of incident response is it's becoming like a bigger and bigger deal for organizations as we see people, kind of having to scale things and support things at scale and having more things that are up and running that they have to worry about, kind of falling down or issues arising in. So how organizations manage incidents is becoming, I think, something that people are paying more and more attention to. So given that kind of slight bit of context, Jake, what can you tell us about what is automated diagnostics and what does it have to do with incident response?
So, as you mentioned, automation has become fairly ubiquitous, so it's good for us to be specific about the type of automation that we're talking about. And there's workflow automation, process automation, and then there's business processes automation that you alluded to. And so we'll dig into the type of automation that we're talking about and where it fits in specifically into incident response. So what we're looking at and to provide the context for the conversation here is during an incident, there's the different stages of people responding to the incident. And as you mentioned, those who are familiar with incident response and PagerDuty are fairly familiar with this notion of being on call and needing to escalate to people and running response plays, and automation fits into these different stages. But what we've pulled up here, and the reason I pulled this up as our first slide to set the context for this conversation, is that even with different types of automation plugged into the incident response process, we are still seeing this pattern of numerous people being interrupted or pulled in to assist with incidents. And that's what this slide is really telling us, right? Is that over the course of the duration of an incident, we're going from 4 to 8 to 16 to 25 people pulled into a Zoom bridge or a Slack channel or a Teams group to respond to an incident. So that's setting the stage for where we're going to talk about where automated diagnostics fits in.
And one thing I loved about the slide is it captures not only here are all the people that are getting pulled in at all these different points, but the time that is elapsing, like the amount of time it just takes to pull these people in and to figure out who do you actually need on this call to figure out what is happening with the incident and also move towards a resolution. And it reminded me of, in preparing for this, I took a look at a blog post from PagerDuty on what is automated diagnostics and why should you care. I love that title. And one of the statistics there was that 50% of a responder's time is kind of spent on determining who is needed to be brought in to support the incident and then trying to figure out if there actually is an incident. And I thought that was a very striking statistic. And I think this slide kind of captures that in a more visceral way.
And that fits right into what we're talking about, right, with automated diagnostics. And so I wanted to pull this up also just to be specific about what we're talking about when it comes to automation within incident response and where this thing that we're calling automated diagnostics that we will define here in a second fits into the end-to-end process. And this is how PagerDuty tends to look at the stages of an incident. And so what you see on the far left here are all of these events and signals that you as an organization use to determine and identify is something going wrong. And we are very particular in the words that we choose here: work, data, customer signals, and events, is because these signals and events might come from monitoring tools, they might come from customer tickets, they might come from testing that internal users are running. And all of that feeds into our filter stage. So this is where we do alert grouping and aggregation and machine learning to identify, is something actually going wrong? And then we go into the mobilize and diagnose stage. And this is where PagerDuty's made its name in bringing the right people in, people who are tied to a particular service where this alert originated. They do their work, we resolve the issue, and then the learning stage happens. And that learning is both human learning, documenting what did we do to fix this, what can we do to prevent this in the future, but also PagerDuty's machine learning to understand, did we provide an accurate signal here?
And I love that learning is part of this process.
Yeah, and so where we want to focus our time today in answering this question of what is automated diagnostics is tying all of this together, this notion of pulling people in and the different stages of the incident. What we have noticed is that even if PagerDuty is doing a great job of cutting out alert noise and deduplicating alerts and identifying anomalies and pulling in the people who are tied to a particular service, there's still this pattern of that first responder needing to rely on other people because, as it's not surprising, there's always going to be reasons that first responder needs assistance, whether that's because there are others in the team or the organization who have a particular set of skills. They have networking expertise or Kubernetes expertise. Those other domain experts have access to particular parts of the infrastructure and environment that first responder may not have access to. Or there's just domain tribal knowledge of the organization in terms of what is connected to what checks need to be run before running a particular remediation. And so there's still this pattern of escalating and pulling in other people. And so that's what we were showing here, right? Which is that in that diagnose phase, responder is pulling in a service owner, network domain expert, and infrastructure expert. And what each of those people tend to do are these technical tasks aligned and associated with their particular domain expertise, right? So a service owner, maybe very well-versed in Kubernetes, will check pod events. A network engineer is going to check routing, and infrastructure engineer is going to check logs and platform layer and so on and so forth. And so this is all alluding to what is automated diagnostics. So what I wanted to do was just provide a visual of what are we talking about here in terms of automating diagnostics. And so what I've pulled up here is a sample run book from our wiki internally about how to handle a particular type of issue, a particular type of incident, right? How to handle stuck transactions in MySQL. And our customers have exactly this, right? They have SharePoint docs and Google Docs and Confluence articles outlining how to handle very specific issues. And so what our product does is automate those steps, right? We start to see how to handle the alert. Step one, make sure you know which database server is affected. Step two, identify the stuck transaction. And what our whole premise is here is to codify and automate that domain expert's investigation as is written here. And so what we're trying to do is take what you see on the left and turn it into what you see on the right. And what you actually see on the right is a number of different teams who have contributed to an end-to-end diagnostic runbook. And what you see on the right is what will be executed programmatically and automatically. And that's what we will go into in the demonstration. And so what this is demonstrating is, as the title says, emulating that domain expert's investigation. This is really what we mean by automated diagnostics, is that when that incident occurs, can we replicate and emulate what the domain experts tend to check when they are first paged or messaged or pinged about an alert?
Yeah, and what is, I think, very powerful about this is it's yes, this is the automation. It's about how do you automate it, but it's also about how do you put all this knowledge into one place that is not in one person's head and not in these disparate sources and places that runbook information sometimes ends up.
Exactly. Right. And that back to that learning stage or learning phase of an incident, we'd like to make this codifying of diagnostic runbooks part of that learning stage. So when an incident occurs, or when we do an analysis of what common incidents do we have, can we start to look at what are those common queries and common checks that our senior engineers tend to take to figure out, A, is something actually wrong, and B, is what's wrong related to parts of the infrastructure that I own or my team owns. And therefore, by automating that, can we reduce the number of people that need to be pulled in? And so what we'll show in the demo, but this is a great summary of what we're ultimately trying to do, is take that those diagnostic checks and simplify them and put them where the responder is responding. So a lot of times our responders are not in our web app, they're in Slack, or they're in the mobile app, and they're going to get paged or buzzed about an incident. And what we'd like to do is point them very succinctly, very simplistically, where to start their investigation, or if they need to pull in someone, that they know whom they need to pull in.
So I feel it may be time to move into a demo. But as we do that, can you talk a little bit about what exactly are we going to see in the demo, and what is the relationship between like PagerDuty's kind of commercial products and some of the open source offerings that are out there?
Yeah, certainly. So what we'll show in the demo is performing an automated diagnostic runbook, or executing, I should say. And so what we'll have is an incident that's already been created by an alert from New Relic, in this case, about service and Kubernetes that's not performing the way it should. So a synthetic check has failed, and then there's going to be a pod alert. And so PagerDuty's core product of incident response is going to be part of this demo, showing just detection of that alert. And then what we'll go into is running an automation action. And so that's part of the process automation suite. That's an add-on to the PagerDuty core platform. Running that automation action is going to trigger a process automation job. Job is just our nomenclature for an automated runbook. And so the process automation product is the commercial version of what was Rundeck Enterprise, and Rundeck is still has an open source core. It's an open source project. It's been around for about 10 years now. And so what we will be showing will have a lot of overlap with that open source product, but there are certain features that we might show that are only available to the commercial product, which is now that process automation product.
Check out part 2 of this What is How-To video for Jake's demo on automated diagnostics.